Alrighty, kicking off the list at number 10, Hal Jordan. Okay, so this is one of DC's biggest controversies right off the bat. Green Lantern? Huh, more like Mean Lantern. Okay, so here's the deal. Back in the 90s when they brought our boy Kyle Rayner into the game, the company thought, hey, maybe it'll be a good idea just to make Hal Jordan a villain. Just for a little bit, while we introduce an entirely new character. Sounds great. Then we have Emerald Twilight. And it showed a broken Green Lantern turn into the horrible Parallax, who of course is a popular villain now. But this was all sudden back in the day. I mean, fans didn't like how abrupt and messy it was when it happened. So Green Lantern Rebirth ended up retconning it a decade later. Man, I'm still waiting to see what happens after that Green Lantern after credit scene. There's probably a bunch of people who don't follow comic book movies or like studio rights, and they're probably sitting on their couch like, damn, when is the sequel coming out? I was really looking forward to that. Not coming out, never happening. And before we mosey on over to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and toss us a thumbs up at the bottom right there, it really does help us out a lot here at the studio. Thank you, you guys are amazing. Okay, back to some bad apples. Number 9, Scarlet Witch. No more mutants. I mean, throw a little comma in there and then I agree. Scarlet Witch. Okay, we're all counting down the days until the release of WandaVision because we could finally see an evil Wanda. Again, probably not, but maybe for a little bit, we'll see. She's the daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, aka Petro Maximoff. Now, she was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but at one point she did join the Avengers. Hero badge, achieved. She's one of the biggest Marvel characters ever, and during the events of M-Day, she spoke those 3 words that I said earlier, and just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered or killed. So that large number being 986,618, only leaving a couple hundred left. Let's hope that we see something like this in the new, MCU shows. Maybe she'll do something crazy and that'll bring mutants into the picture, rather than bringing them out of the picture. Number 8, the Maestro. Okay, I know that name sounds cool, but this guy is an absolute nightmare. He is not a conductor of classical music, no. The Maestro in the series Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect is a version of the Hulk that was way more weird than Smart Hulk dabbing. I know, it's close second. Making his first appearance in a vision in the Incredible Hulk Volume 2 issue 401, Maestro was the main antagonist in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. Weird, let me explain. The story takes place about 100 or so years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. Kinda like where we're heading now. This alternate future version of the Hulk Maestro had been absorbing all of this nuclear radiation the entire time and then ended up becoming one of the strongest things on the planet. Obviously. Massive increases in strength and anger plus the brains of Bruce Banner made this guy arguably unstoppable. He also appeared in a not so chill version of the Hulk in the Old Man Logan storyline where him and his cousins have babies. So we'll just say that the spot belongs to Maestro. We're not even going to talk about that version. Yuck.
Number 7 is Iron Man. I know, I was shocked too, but if you think about it, he is super dependent on technology and his suit and all that, so this bad guy named Immortus realizes this and he discovers a weakness in the neural link between Stark and his Iron Man suit. So Immortus then begins manipulating Tony's psyche, having the Avengers do his evil biddings. At first it's just little things, but then it gets really dark. Tony eventually murders like 3 allies of the Avengers and likely would have kept on doing it, but his teammates realize that something's up and are able to snap him out. Thank goodness for friends. At number 6 we have Angel, who later becomes Archangel. So he's one of the original 5 X-Men who eventually joins X-Force. During the mutant massacre, an evil mutant named Harpoon cripples his wings by impaling each wing crucifix style. Whoa, wild crucifixion was happening to the wings and it was very upsetting. Later, they get infected, they have to be amputated, and everyone thinks he's dead, but it turns out he was transported by this super powerful villain named Apocalypse elsewhere. As you can imagine, he takes losing his wings, his only power, really badly. He's in a dark place when Apocalypse offers to give him new wings if he becomes Death, one of his 4 horsemen, and this dark place makes him want to agree. But then he gets these metallic wings and they have these like razor sharp feathers. Love this. And then he just has this like need for violence. So he becomes even more formidable to the X-Men because he used to be one of them. So he knows all their tactics, he knows their weaknesses. So as you can imagine, epic fights ensue. Number 5 is the Hulk. I mean, he's always had trouble with rage, so it's sort of a no-brainer that at some point he gets super evil. It's kind of his thing. He turns into a sadistic dictator in not only 1, but 2 alternate futures. I'll tell you about one of them. The Hulk figures out a way to fully take over Bruce Banner's mind. He becomes more and more evil, eventually killing other superheroes, and then for some reason takes over the state of California. He becomes the ruler there, takes his cousin, the She-Hulk, as his bride. It gets weird, it gets messed up. Dark times, dark times. Green Lantern comes in at number 4. I know, boo his terrible movie. It was awful, but can we respect Ryan Reynolds, tip our hats a bit for calling that out in Deadpool 2 and wishing that he never made it? I love that so much. What a wonderful man. Things take a twist in his life with the destruction of Coast City and everybody in it. So he's just gutted and in grief, and then he snaps. He goes really crazy, does a bunch of things, then goes to Oa and drains all the energy from the central battery and becomes the villain Parallax. Then he goes on a rampage, trying to basically change the universe into his own image. Needless to say, a lot of DC heroes have to get involved and step in to try to put him down. At number 3, we have Venom. I mean, this guy really flip-flops a lot. Like, it's almost like he was bad, then he was good, then he was bad. So it's not a huge surprise he's on our list. He's gone up against Spider-Man for many years. He taunts him, he threatens his loved ones, he's just super evil and awful. But once he has offspring, once he becomes a daddy, it starts to appear that he just has a little bit more of a conscience. So he sort of is the opposite almost of this. So when Carnage starts to appear, like we saw in the movie, he really starts to align himself more with the good guys, but then ends up bonded with this like low-level thug, namely Price, and then that just makes him all crazy again. So he flip-flops a lot of times and sort of is an interesting anti-hero, I think. Number 2 on our list is Superman. Oh man, you just knew this was gonna happen. I mean, he's so powerful. In the Injustice universe, we got to see what would happen if Superman was just pushed a little too far. The Joker is insane, so he comes up with this huge plan. He gasses Superman, so he thinks that he's fighting Doomsday, but it turns out it's actually Lois Lane, who's pregnant with his baby at the time. Then Joker ties a nuclear bomb to Metropolis to Lois Lane's heart. Whoa, like dark. How do you even come up with this? So Lois Lane dies, Superman City is gone, his soul is crushed, and it pushes him too far. Like, I think that's totally fair, and his old rules are just gone, so he puts his fist through Joker's chest. Yeah, Joker's chest. As you can imagine, Batman's pretty horrified, so he kind of starts distancing himself because he's like, whoa, you're super dark, man. Obviously not in those exact words. But then Superman starts really taking over the League, he turns into the regime, which then starts using violence throughout the world to enforce what he thinks is right. So of course, again, they have to try to take him out. And then finally at number 1, we have Jean Grey, or the Phoenix. I mean, she was definitely the one that first jumped into my mind. I don't know about you guys. We've seen in the movies, for sure, and just sort of scratched the surface, I think, about how far she goes. Full disclosure though, I did not see the most recent movie. It had such bad reviews that I just couldn't bring myself to do it, but I'm waiting for an airplane ride to maybe give it a go. After a mission in space, she gets exposed to a lot of radiation and almost dies. The Phoenix Force feels her psychic cry and takes her form. Now that she has all this power, Jean has a really hard time dealing with this increased power, and is also at the same time manipulated by a mutant called Mastermind. Long story short, she destroys a star, she kills a whole civilization, and just gets downright evil. So that's why she's my number 1.
In at 10, Captain America. Captain America, who people fondly call Cap, found himself entangled with the group of Hydra, his longtime foe that he had been fighting against for years. This unexpected twist occurred in 2016's Captain America Steve Rogers number 1, when Cap uttered the shocking phrase of "Hail Hydra" after callously pushing a fellow ally out of a plane. Prior to this, Cap had experienced a significant transformation. Due to the actions of the Iron Nail, the super soldier serum in Cap's bloodstream was neutralized, causing his body to age, aligning with his actual age of 90 years old. This resulted in him assuming the persona of Old Man Cap, similar to his portrayal in Endgame for a period of time, but eventually a twist unfolded involving the cosmic cube known as the Tesseract that was in the movies. However, the cosmic cube had taken the form of a 4-year-old girl named Kobik, who had been manipulated by the Red Skull into believing that Hydra was good. When Kobik restored Cap to his youthful and robust physique, she also implanted him with an unwavering loyalty to Hydra. So he wasn't actually evil, he just thought that he was, and it's a whole thing. It still shocked us though, and people were mad about it. In at 9, Superman. In the world of injustice, Superman is driven to extremes by the death of Lois Lane at the hands of the Joker. Superman was manipulated into thinking that Lois was Doomsday. I'm sure you can guess how that went. Which leads him to believe that he must take a more aggressive approach to maintaining law and order in the world. As a result of this, Superman becomes a ruthless dictator, using his immense powers to control and subjugate anyone who opposes him, or just flat out kill them. He is willing to use violence and force to achieve his goals, and he quickly becomes a symbol of fear and oppression, rather than the hope and justice symbol that he was. One of the most interesting aspects of the injustice version of Superman is the way in which he's portrayed as a tragic figure. Like, while his actions are extreme and villainous, it is clear that he's motivated by a deep sense of loss and grief. However, this does cause him to, become a freaking dictator. I don't think that really justifies it, but it makes him understandable. It also makes him butt heads with his original version when they bring him over to help defeat the blood-soaked Man of Steel. In at 8, Spider-Man. Okay, technically this is Spider-Man, but it's a zombie version of Spider-Man. I'm gonna count it anyway because this is freaking messed up, zombie or not. On Earth 2149, an alien plague ends up infecting all superpowered individuals and turns them into zombies. However, it's later revealed that the Necronomicon from Evil Dead was actually what caused it. But after learning that the plague was really bad, Peter ran home to get Aunt May and MJ the hell out of Dodge, understandably. But when he gets there, we get a good old case of protagonist syndrome and boom, zombie spider. He ends up becoming a zombie right then and there, and then eats the 2 most important people in his life. He also has a fractured jaw before becoming a zombie, so I'm sure that you can imagine that this isn't a pretty sight, even by zombie standards, okay? It may not be our Pete, but it was a version of Spider-Man, and him turning into a zombie right as he gets home, yeah, pretty damn shocking.
Number 7, Steve Rogers. Okay, there are a couple lines from Steve Rogers that fans will remember from the MCU, like Avengers Assemble, that is America's ass, but the line Hail Hydra was followed by a roar of applause opening night, because not only does he use his post-Avengers knowledge to obtain the scepter, which in that of itself is already a great moment because the audience expects another cool elevator fight, and then Steve outsmarts even us. But the line Hail Hydra also comes right from the comics, and a bit of a darker scenario this time around. So the last words in Captain America Steve Rogers were that of Hail Hydra, and fans went nuts. This was huge news. People were pretty upset. I mean, readers were annoyed that this was only done for shock value. The 2017 series Secret Empire concluded that Bad Cap was a double and the good guy was locked in the Cosmic Cube. That's better. I mean, I guess that's better. Number 6, Superboy-Prime. Superboy-Prime. Yes, of course. Crisis on Infinite Earths is one of the biggest events to happen in DC history. It literally reshaped the universe. And it all comes down to Superboy-Prime. First appearing in DC Comics Presents issue number 87, Superboy-Prime is, well, the son of Laura and Jor-El, and after he couldn't save his Earth from destruction, he teamed up with an aging version of Superman from the late Earth 2 and Alexander Luthor Jr. of Earth 3 to fight the Anti-Monitor. Now this is a huge battle. Superboy-Prime helped save hundreds and hundreds of lives from tons of planets. He was among other survivors stuck in a universe where he doesn't belong. Kind of feels like me. I just feel like you don't belong somewhere. It's normal. It's a normal thing, guys. So after the battle, Superboy-Prime hung out in this peaceful paradise dimension with the other survivors, thanks to Luthor. That is until Superboy-Prime gets frustrated of living out these old memories, these sad memories, and then he literally punched reality apart and retconned a lot, including the resurrection of number 5, Jason Todd, aka Red Hood. Making his debut in Detective Comics 168 in The Man Behind the Red Hood, Jason Todd took over the mantle of Robin. Now at this point, Dick Grayson left to become Nightwing. And well, Jason? He has a lot of anger. I mean, once you get beat to death, literally, by the Joker, and your mentor, your boy, doesn't avenge your death, sure, anger is a word that I could use for it. Then there's a sweet little link. That's right, so after Batman, A Death in the Family, when Jason is brutally killed by the Joker, he comes back as the bad and badass Red Hood. Now, at this point, he's ruthless. He has much darker ways of getting what he wants. I mean, I don't blame the guy. If the Joker killed me, Bruce left me, I'd kick a few doors in as well. I'd kick all the doors in. Number 4, Jean Grey. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. Seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101, guys. No, literally, it's Uncanny X-Men issue 101. There it is. And Phoenix has entered the chat. This dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying an entire solar system. Yeah, that killed like billions. And took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Brave, but it's also horrible. A few years later, it was then revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. Sometimes you just want people back, and we gotta deal with it. Cool. Number 3, Spider-Man. Okay, so back in the 80s, Spider-Man got a new look. How cool. Something fans always love, right? When you just change the look of a character that you've loved forever. Yeah, we go back now to the Amazing Spider-Man 252, where it all began. The rumors are true, says the front page, introducing the new Spider-Man. Yeah, during the Secret Wars arc, this new costume was thrown in to spice things up, and fans didn't like it. Of course, fans hated it. It was later revealed that the costume was actually a symbiote, and that wearing this new slick suit was altering Peter's physical and mental state. Kind of like when a sock falls halfway off when you're wearing a boot. You're all of a sudden just not the same person you used to be, you know? So over time, Peter was getting more and more dark, a little bit more brutal. And that's what happens when you change it up, man. Sorry, not sorry. If you think he's not bad enough to be justified as a villain during this phase, just watch the jazz club scene from Spider-Man 3 again, and we'll talk. Number 2, Bucky Barnes. 2005 was a wild time. I talked about Red Hood already on this list, but Marvel had their own type of badass come back from the dead as well. In 2005, Bucky Barnes returned, but of course he wasn't the same. So near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane whilst taking down Baron Zemo. Pretty cool, fun times. Now the bomb went off. Ooh, not good. Hurling Steve and Bucky into the freezing waters. And as for Cap, I mean, we kind of saw his life, we know what happens. He came out of this pretty easy. He remained frozen, just hanging out, had a good time. Bucky though, good old trusty sidekick Buck, wasn't so lucky. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel. So they scooped him up, fixed the whole left arm situation that he had going on, brainwashed him, and then turned him into a brutal assassin. It's heartbreaking. He has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce fighter and assassin, but he doesn't remember how he knows these things, making him a deadly sleeper agent and now a terrifying villain. This is Steve's right-hand man. I mean, one of the biggest turning points of Marvel was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. This was a conflict that came to life on the big screen back in 2014, and we're still watching Bucky try and sort this out even today. Not an easy road for the guy. Poor Buck. And finally, number 1, Hawkeye. This one was quite controversial when it went down. Okay, so the introduction of the Infinity Stones were pretty sweet. We see Captain Marvel, Quicksilver, Wanda, all these heroes getting their powers from these stones. But in Joss Whedon's 2012 Avengers, we see these stones make someone a villain. Yeah, we see Hawkeye finally take center stage as a villain. I mean, so before the opening title card, we see Loki return, and he takes Clint Barton's mind for his own use. Bam! That Hawkeye is the whole reason that the Avengers got their ass kicked on the helicarrier. He was a staple when it came to intel on the Avengers.
In its end, Spider-Man. Spider-Carnage isn't just another Spider-Man villain, he's actually an alternate version of Spider-Man. Hailing from one of many Earths, this character was introduced in the 90s Spider-Man animated series. My favorite Spider-Man animated series, might I add. This Peter's life was actually very similar to the main Spider-Man, except this version also lost Aunt May as well as Uncle Ben and developed a resentment for humanity because of it. And then he had to deal with a clone, which definitely sucked. Until he and the clone learned that who they thought was the clone, who was going by Bill Riley, could actually be the real Peter Parker that broke Peter, or well, the real Peter. And a Carnage symbiote from another universe actually sensed this hatred and resentment, and through a portal created by Jonathan Ohm, it bonded with Peter, driving him even more insane, and then he started calling himself Spider-Carnage. From my understanding, this character hasn't been seen since that final episode, but I want him to make a comeback, okay? Like, add this character to the MCU, or like let Andrew Garfield fight the Carnage symbiote so that he can and have the Spider-Carnage or something, please. And at 9, Superman. While this seems like something that any version of Superman would do if they turned bad, it's actually interesting to see that only the Injustice version of Superman did it. Yeah, you know, after Joker blew up Metropolis and killed his wife and unborn child, Superman killed him. And then, you know, started a whole regime. But after getting fed up with Batman leading a resistance against that regime, Superman just also told the world that Batman was really Bruce Wayne. And do you want to know how he did it? Like a press conference, a worldwide news message, a Mysterio-like video? No. The dude frickin' added him on Twitter. Superman, in just 4 simple words, just tells the world that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Using those 4 words, actually, from the official Superman Twitter account. The dude doesn't even like use his Clark Kent Twitter. Man, he's still hiding his identity, but just is like, yeah, no, it's Bruce. 2.5 million retweets and 3.5 million likes. It was definitely #1 on trending, at least until like Kim K posted a pic in like a Batman costume to capitalize on the news and had like the champagne going. Then Batman would be #2 on trending. That's probably what would happen, honestly. And at 8, Scarlet Witch. Considering how the entirety of House of M is meant to be about how one person changed reality, I think it's fairly safe to say that she's a powerful hero even if she isn't a hero all the time. Like in Multiverse of Madness, for example, when she somehow was able to send demons and monsters across different dimensions to attack America Chavez, but couldn't just go to those dimensions herself, even if she was the villain in that scenario. She was still able to take on the Illuminati of that universe. Okay, she was able to easily take them all down. She's an extremely powerful mutant, whether she's on your side or the side against you, but also falling boulders can kill Captain Marvel. Look, the only limit to Wanda's abilities is, in any incarnation of her, is her brain. And like, that's my one gripe with Multiverse of Madness, okay? Like, the whole point to getting America is to like be able to cross dimensions, but she's literally able to do that. And also, you captured a whole city into your own personal TV show and brought your dead Infinity Stone power boyfriend back from the dead for it, okay? I think you can easily handle any illness that your son ends up getting. And in the whole House of M thing, you literally rewrite reality so that there are actual kids that you can live with and raise, okay? So you've been a villain. And at 7, Batman. When Ares, the Greek god of war, created a helmet that amplified his powers 100-fold, war broke out in an effort to stop him. For 2 years, Batman and Wonder Woman fought side by side and got close enough to attempt to stop the god. It was during this war that Bruce and Diana fell in love with each other, and they and their allies pledged to kill the god of war in order to end his reign of terror. As they finally mounted an attack to kill Ares, the two were able to get the helmet off of him. However, Diana was incapacitated, but Batman thought she was dead. Driven by grief of the loss of his love, Batman puts on the helmet to defeat Ares, but it's a helmet created by a god of war and not Kratos. So yeah, I'm sure that you can figure out where this is going. Despite being warned of its corrupting influence by Diana earlier on, he thought that he could wield it mercifully and make it just and use it for good. He successfully killed Ares, but was turned into a warrior who's merciless and just lost his old code because he thought it was worthless. Despite learning that Diana actually survived as well and was only stunned, Bruce was too addicted to the power of the helmet to actually let it go. He ended up choosing to kill the woman he loved rather than losing the helmet, which is just... what the hell? And at 6, Hulk. Oh, here we go. Hulk, aka Maestro, in the Future Imperfect storyline, is actually the Hulk that is present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intellect and the Hulk's more evil personality traits. Monstrous personality traits. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed the majority of the human race, the radiation from that war was actually absorbed into Hulk, basically supercharging him, turning him into an even more powerful version that isn't Claw. Like, he doesn't have to get angrier to become more powerful, he just now is because he absorbed all that damn radiation. Then he ended up creating the Hulk gang with She-Hulk forcefully. I can't really get into it. I'm sure that you can understand where I'm going with this, but YouTube's gonna get mad if I explain it any further, but it's still freaking terrifying, okay? The Hulk is already a monster, then add on to that more radiation, and then the destruction of a country humanity and the world, and then yeah. Also, this was 1992. They did this in 1992. Halfway through, into number 5, Robin. Robin is a prominent character in Batman's crime-fighting endeavors, okay? He's the loyal sidekick and partner in crime, or I guess partner in anti-crime, his battle against justice in Gotham. Over the years, there also have been 5 individuals who have taken up the mantle of Robin because they just keep on dying. The first Robin was Dick Grayson, a young acrobat who eventually goes on to become Nightwing before assuming the role of Batman himself. Jason Todd, the second Robin, was a troubled orphan who found solace and purpose under Batman's guidance until his untimely death at the hands of the Joker, who was later resurrected as the Red Hood and embarked on a more ruthless path, starting off as a villain and then becoming an anti-hero vigilante character that is willing to kill, but it isn't. And I mean, like, we were all surprised at the reveal, alright, we were, because let's be honest, we thought that he was dead. Him coming back is kind of what started the whole, oh yeah, characters are gonna keep coming back thing, and you can't really kill them because, I mean, if you do, where are you gonna keep making your money? People being creative and coming up with new heroes regularly? You're funny. In at 4, Scarlet Witch. Considering how the entirety of House of M is about how Wanda changed reality, I think it's fairly safe to say that she's a powerful person, okay? Even if she didn't start out as a hero, like in Multiverse of Madness or in the MCU. Like, she was somehow able to send demons and monsters across different dimensions to attack America Chavez, but couldn't just go to those dimensions herself. She was able to take on the Illuminati in that universe and beat them all down, easily proving that she's not only an extremely powerful mutant, but no matter what side she's on, the other person's gonna lose. The only limit to Wanda's abilities is her brain. I feel like after all of, like, you know, her arc and then having to kill Vision even though you weren't really killing him because he's just a robot and blah blah blah, I feel like her becoming a villain was kind of surprising, but also every time she becomes a villain after being a hero, it's kind of surprising, but I guess it's kind of not at this point because we expect it. But hey, look, when she rewrote reality, I'm sure you were surprised. I feel like you should have been. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Green Lantern. I think this point is justified thanks to Emerald Twilight from back in 1994. The story begins with Hal Jordan holding a doll in the middle of what was once Coast City. Grief-stricken, he recreates the city using his power ring, including its deceased inhabitants and his father. Somehow, I don't know how you can recreate people with the power of will, but okay. Which violated the Green Lantern Corps code, which forbids lanterns from using their powers for personal gain. And then he gets reprimanded for it, but this makes him even madder. So Hal drains the holographic projection's energy and travels to O to use the central power battery to permanently reconstruct Coast City. And then the Guardians send other Green Lanterns to stop him, but of course, he's the freaking protagonist, he wipes them all out. As Hal's rampage continues, the consequences of his actions ripple throughout the cosmos, with Green Lanterns vanishing and their rings inexplicably disappearing. Even Guy Gardner, who wears Sinestro's yellow ring, witnessed the devastation caused by Hal's actions, and then, you know, he starts calling himself Parallax, and it gets all freaky. But ultimately, in number 2, Green Arrow. Haha, yes, even billionaires who love archery can still be evil. Shocking! Billionaires being evil? In Green Arrow number 7, published in February of 2011, Ollie faced off with the Lady of the Forest, a mysterious entity that appeared in Star City's new forest. It grew there after Prometheus had blown up Star City into, ironically enough, a star-shaped crater, which is the topic of how he turned evil. Because after doing this, and after watching Roy lose his arm, after watching Roy's daughter Leanne die in that explosion, Oliver went and shot Prometheus right in the dome. He turned evil because we had to deal with the Trial of Green Arrow storyline, which is, from what I've seen, the most hated Green Arrow comic storyline ever. And finally, in at number 1, The Flash. In an alternate future, a version of Barry Allen, also known as The Flash, blames himself for the death of Wally West and became determined to prevent it from happening. He started by killing his enemies and using these actions to somehow increase his speed so that he could travel back in time to fix his mistake. While the actual current version of Flash was busy dealing with a rockslide in Pakistan, future Flash arrived to confront Daniel West and prevent Wally's death. During their battle, battle, Future Flash explained the tragic consequences that would result from Reverse Flash's actions, and fueled by rage, Future Flash rips off Daniel's head just in time to prevent the accident that would have killed Wally. Flash rips off someone's head. The Flash then confronted his future self for this act of, murder, but was crippled by him because crippling your past self isn't going to have any consequences when you're traveling through time. But a newly costumed Wally West shows up as like the new Flash to stop the Future Flash, and then Paradox things, the Speed Force tears open, he tries to seal it, and then the Future Flash becomes the current Flash. It's a whole thing, but yeah, Barry Allen going on a killing spree of all of his worst foes, yeah, that's shocking.
Number 10. Thunderbird. AKA John Proudstar, Thunderbird made his comic book debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, and during his childhood on the Apache Reservation in Camp Verde, Arizona, John wasn't like the other kids on the reservation. He grew up extremely strong and he became an athlete, and at just the age of 20 his mutant powers manifested when he wrestled a charging bison with his bare hands. That's a lot of strength. Now this earned him fame on the reservation, so much so that Charles Xavier caught wind of the young man through Cerebro and invited him to join the X-Men. The first mission John took was actually the rescue of the original X-Men from Krakoa. Xavier then gave him the nickname Thunderbird. Now Apocalypse experimented on Thunderbird and transformed him into the Horseman of War at one point. Now fortunately this didn't last forever, as he broke free of Apocalypse's mind control and began getting his life back together. You can find all of this in Exiles issue 1. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you haven't already, you can go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It really does help our studio out a lot. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for supporting Top 10 Nerd. Now back to this list. Number 9. Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Wither, aka Kevin Ford, grew up thinking he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person on the planet. His mutant power started to manifest, and he noticed it first in his plants and then on his clothes. See, his plants would die and his clothes would start to fade away. They would start to decay, almost wither away. Now we get it. Now his father tried to calm him down once he realized this, but coming into contact with Kevin, well, you could have guessed what happens. He was soon discovered and was invited to join Xavier's Institute to learn how to control his wild powers of organic decay. He got close with Wallflower, aka Lori Collins, but in the House of M storyline, he touched her arm and crippled her. He ran away hurt and was soon met by Selene, the Black Queen, and she invited Wither to join her circle, and he gladly accepted. Number 8. Polaris. She's a powerful mutant who came to control magnetism, and she made her first appearance in X-Men 49 as Lorna Dane. But then in issue 97, she was Polaris. Cerebro identified her as a mutant when she stepped out of the shower and had green hair. So Iceman had a crush on her when she was part of the team, but she was in love with Havoc. Her powers are of course similar to Magneto's, but she lost them after the M-Day event as well. So when Apocalypse came into the picture, he also restored her powers, as she was deemed the Horseman Pestilence. She was saved by her lover man Havoc and was also healed of Apocalypse's mind control. So again, didn't last too long, but definitely did see enough dark days.
And it's 7. Batman. When Ares, the Greek god of war, created a helmet that amplified his powers 100-fold, war broke out in an effort to stop him. For 2 years, Batman and Wonder Woman fought side by side to get close enough to attempt to stop Ares. It was during this war where Bruce and Diana actually fell in love. They and their allies made a pledge to kill the god of war and end his reign of terror once and for all, and when they finally mounted the attack to get to Ares, the two were able to get the helmet off the war god. But Diana was incapacitated, causing Batman to believe that she had died. Driven by grief yet again, Bruce put on the helmet of the god of war to defeat Ares, despite being warned of its corrupting influence. Believing that he could wield it mercifully while making war fair and just, he succeeded in killing Ares, but then turned into a merciless warrior who just destroyed the world, despite that learning that Wonder Woman had actually survived and was only stunned. Kingdom Come, man. That's nuts. And at 6, Doctor Strange. In the midst of the Infinity War, Doctor Strange found himself resorting to the forbidden knowledge contained within the Darkhold. Desperately seeking a means to overcome the formidable Thanos, within his pages he stumbled upon the Dreamwalking spell, which granted him the ability to traverse alternate universes. Tragically though, Strange's meddling inadvertently triggered an incursion, resulting in the utter annihilation of another universe. Recognizing the dire consequence of his actions, Doctor Strange ultimately renounced the corrupting influence of the Darkhold, taking responsibility for his actions, and entrusting the safeguarding of the tome with the Illuminati. Together they sought out the Book of Vishanti, harnessing its power to defeat Thanos, but to prevent any further repercussions, Doctor Strange submitted to execution at the hands of Black Bolt. Meanwhile, the Darkhold found its new sanctuary within the Sanctum Sanctorum of New York, carefully protected by Mordo, who swore an oath to prevent dangerous tomes from falling into the wrong hands. But again, it was evil Doctor Strange, okay? We saw it in Multiverse of Madness. We saw it in the What If storyline. Doctor Strange has gone dark multiple times, alright? Sorry. Halfway through into number 5, Green Arrow. Created by Grant Morrison and Arnie Jorgensen, the most recognized version of Prometheus made his first appearance in New Year's Evil Prometheus from 1998. Commonly an adversary of the Justice League, Prometheus would also serve as an enemy to Batman, Green Arrow, and Midnighter. Prometheus possesses no superhuman abilities, but has undergone intense physical and mental training and utilizes an extensive range of equipment and technology like Batman does. However, Prometheus is probably the most known in the Green Arrow community for being the start of the Trial of Green Arrow storyline, commonly known as the worst Green Arrow storyline of all time, where Oliver kills Prometheus after he bombs Star City, kills Roy's daughter, then ends up cutting off Roy's arm, and then Oliver gets put on trial for his death. Yeah, you can say that was Oliver going dark, excluding the show. And at 4, Hulk. Oh man, okay, this is an interesting one. Hulk, aka Maestro from the Future Imperfect storyline, is actually the worst version of the Hulk you can understand, okay, like morally speaking. He's from the Old Man Logan series, but first appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intellect and the Hulk's everything else. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from that war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk and turning him into an even more powerful version. Ended up violently attacking his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk gang. I don't want to get into that, but at this point I kind of have to because this number's about him. It's absolutely terrifying, okay? Because while the Hulk is already a freaking monster, add on to that more radiation, more power, the destruction of the country. Yeah, okay? And not only that, but this was 1992. God, they ran the whole Hulk gang thing in 1992. Thank God I wasn't alive. Getting close to the end in number 3, The Flash. Barry Allen, aka The Flash, is one of the former heroes who turned into a bloodthirsty vampire after Batman spread the vampire plague throughout the world of Earth 43. He confronts Wally West from a different world and attempts to kill him, but before he can succeed, he was killed by Roy Harper in this world, who shot him with wooden arrows in the back. Yep, that's right, wooden arrows count as stakes. I wonder if these were T-bone. But even if he went down easily, that doesn't mean that he wasn't powerful, okay? Since, you know, a vampire with the powers of the Flash, and not just any Flash, Barry Allen, the literal Speed Force itself, basically, who can run so hard that he can compress air molecules under his feet and run up the air like a staircase. Yeah, I don't think you really need to think about why that's terrifying. If he hadn't have been killed by Roy, he would have wiped out humanity, okay? And that's why they had to kill him off, so that didn't happen, okay? There was no way to defend against that, especially since Batman was the one who turned him. But ultimately, in number 2, Captain America. In a surprising turn of events, Captain America actually found himself entangled with the group of Hydra, a longtime foe that he had fought against for years and was basically his most iconic villain. This unexpected twist occurred in 2016's Captain America Steve Rogers #1 when Cap uttered the shocking phrase, "Hail Hydra," after callously pushing a fellow ally out of an airplane. Prior to this, Cap had experienced a significant transformation due to the actions of the Iron Nail. The super soldier serum in Cap's bloodstream was neutralized, causing his body to age, aligning with his actual age of 90 years old. But this resulted in him assuming the persona of Old Man Cap, similar to his portrayal at the end of Endgame. For a period of time, he was like this, but it eventually was changed with the Cosmic Cube, which is the Tesseract in the movies, causing him to just go nuts, okay? He transformed into a 4-year-old and then was manipulated by Red Skull into believing that Hydra was good, so then like Koblik restored Cap to his actual like proper physique and whatever, they also made him loyal to Hydra. So yeah, it wasn't well received. And finally, in at number 1, Hal Jordan. I think at this point, it's justified that thanks to the Emerald Twilight from back in 1994, Hal Jordan's gonna be on this list. The story begins with Hal Jordan holding a doll in the middle of what was once Coast City. Grief-stricken, he recreates the city using his power ring, including its deceased inhabitants, including his father, violating the Green Lantern Corps code, which forbids lanterns from using their powers for personal gain. Hal is contacted by the Guardians of the Universe, who reprimand him, but furious, Hal drains the holographic projection's energy and then travels to O and drains this central power battery to reconstruct Coast City. Green Lanterns are sent to stop him. Hal destroys all of them. His rampage then continues. He almost destroys a timeline with this. Even Guy Gardner, who wears Sinestro's yellow ring, was scared of the devastation that Hal was causing. I'm gonna call that going dark. He started calling himself Parallax. Have you seen that movie? That's not a good thing to call yourself, dude. Just like get a proper mask next time.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Blob. Fred Dukes, aka Blob, made his comic book debut back in Uncanny X-Men issue 3, and he got his powers when he was just a young man. He often looked at himself as this extra super strong freak of nature at this point, just this giant strong man whose temper often got the best of him. The X-Men met him at a carnival where he was using his might and muscle just to get by. And then when Scott Summers approached Blob and asked if he'd heard about the X-Men, he responds with, "Oh, those jerky juveniles in the corny costumes? Yeah, I've heard of those guys." First of all, rude. So he goes back and Charles has him tested. He has him pulling these massive chains so hard that he breaks these chains like King Kong. And then he starts to make a break for it, launching away any X-Men member in his path. So now he's gone, but now he knows everybody's real identity because he was there for a bit. And then he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm out of here. So Charles had to track him down and then erase his memory from his brain. I had to start with Blob because he was so close to being a member. So much potential, and then he ended up picking the wrong team 3 issues later. But we had him for a bit. And before we continue on with this list, if you guys haven't already, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up because it helps our channel out so much. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to our list. Number 9, Vulcan. He named himself after the Roman god of fire, but Vulcan's real identity was that of Gabriel Summers. He was born after Cyclops and Havoc. Well, not really born, he was surgically removed from his mother's body and placed in an incubator accelerator, aged to be at his prime, and then sent back to Earth to work for Devan Shikari. He then escaped and was found by Moira McTaggart with no memories of who he is or where he came from. He was impressing Charles quite a bit and all he wanted to do was learn his mutant abilities. Sounds like the dream student. So Charles needed help from him and other newcomers to find the remaining X-Men after most of them had been depowered from the Scarlet Witch. So Charles put him in this danger room purely made of Charles' thoughts as a training exercise to get them sharp in a short amount of time. So inside it feels like months of training, but in actuality it's only a few hours. Then Vulcan and his new team were sent to Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. But Vulcan revealed to Scott that Xavier sacrificed his own brother to save him. And then Kid Vulcan's true origins are shown, and in the next issue of Deadly Genesis, he's unleashed. Number 8, Frenzy. Joanna Cargill made her first comic book debut in X-Factor issue 4 when she accidentally punched her father so hard that her hand went through his chest. Now her father was by no means a good person at all, but I mean doesn't mean he deserved to go out like that. Plus finding out you're a mutant at that time in that way must have been pretty traumatizing. She became known as Frenzy and she joined the Allegiance of Evil. After the Acolytes disbanded, Joanna became an ambassador for Genosha and stood by Magneto until she was captured by the US government in order to learn more about Magneto. But she didn't talk. She kept her mouth shut until Jean Grey entered and freed her, giving her the option to join the X-Men the easy way or the hard way. Jean used the hard way and then Frenzy's entire attitude was changed just like that. Her brain was different. Now her personality was campy, it was awkward, and not nearly as confident as before. But she did help the X-Men find Magneto's base. She was a team member even if it was forced and awkward. After Magneto's defeat, her mind control was released and she rejoined the Acolytes and left the X-Mansion. Again, a little brief, but it still counts. Number 7, Glob Herman. Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants a lot. So already we're off to a promising start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not having it. So much so that his mother drove out Glob to Westchester and left him for Professor X. See, this mutation was interesting. His skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is kind of cool. He runs with the New Mutants now, but at one point he did join the Omega Gang, led by Kid Omega, and they made their own stand for mutant rights. See, Glob wasn't a fan of the school, and he also had a grudge by the way that his father treated him. So he had a pretty harsh take on how to treat humans. Poor Glob, I mean, he had a rough childhood, not exactly his fault here at all. Number 6, Kid Omega. Okay, that guy that I just mentioned, of course, I'll fill you in a little bit on him as well and what gang that he was a part of. Quintavious Quinton Quirinius made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134, and he has been described as one of the most powerful telepaths, one of the most strongest mutants ever besides Jean Grey. He was once the host of the Phoenix Force as well, so that should give you an indication. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang, which was a gang that takes out humans for the crimes they committed against mutants. He even went to a tattoo shop to get him and the gang tattoos of an Omega symbol to put over top of the X-Men symbol. So they weren't playing around here. I mean, at least try wash off tattoos first. I mean, give it some thought, you know, those things are forever. Number 5, Banshee. Making his first appearance in X-Men issue 28, Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep in Ireland. Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. He went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but was killed during Deadly Genesis when he tried to stop the Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. Banshee remained one of the unliving until the Apocalypse twins resurrected him using the Death Seed, thus becoming the Horseman of Death himself. Later on, he ended up in the custody of the X-Men when Beast thought it was best to put him in a coma until the healing of Death Seed energy is complete. Number 4, Jubilee. Making her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 244, Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, first discovered her mutant powers of generating this blinding and explosive blast from her hands. She was discovered by Dazzler, Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm during a rescue at the mall. And when she followed the women through the portal, she ended up at the X-Men's temporary base in the Australian outback. So she stayed there hiding, and then when the Reavers captured Wolverine and took over their base, she borrowed the X-Men's clothes and made a suit for herself. So she went and rescued Wolverine and aided him back to health. She's already an X-Men, look at that, just like that. So Jubilee and Wolverine ended up becoming a good pair, working missions together, and then a vampire ended up infecting the area of Union Square and Curse of the Mutants, and Jubilee, being caught in the path of this infection, ended up becoming a vampire herself. And in perfect harmony, she in the story ends up infecting Wolverine during her bloodthirsty time. And he was coming back to rescue her as well when it all happened. She's kept in a holding cell where Wolverine is really the only X-Men saying that they should keep her alive. So rough times, rough times. Number 3, Tattoo. AKA Christine Cord, she made her first comic book debut in New X-Men issue 126. She's a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin. And if that's not cool enough, she can phase through matter. So, coolest mutant ever, okay. She is also one of the Omega Gang members, and one time, her and the other members, led by Quentin Quire, started a riot at Xavier Institute during opening day celebrations. So Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head, and then told him that if she became solid, he wouldn't survive to see the end of it. But then, Emma Frost reverted the trick by turning into Diamond, and then putting her hand into Tattoo's head to prevent her from taking out Cyclops. What a confusing sight to see. Superheroes are so cool. And at one point, she also attacked Beast and Wolverine, but she was being controlled by Cassandra Nova, so. Number 2, Rachel Summers. She's the daughter of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in an alternate universe on Earth 811, and she makes her first appearance in X-Men 141, the Days of Future Past story. So she was born from the Phoenix Force merging with Jean, so she got the abilities of a telepath and of a telekinetic. She was raised at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters when she met Franklin Richards and became really close. Now one day the school was attacked by federal troops, and she was one of the only survivors. She was taken in by the crazy Ahab, where she was brainwashed and became the mutant Hound, where she used her psionic powers to hunt down other mutants. Her time as this horrible mutant hunter weighed heavy on her conscience afterwards. I mean, she even got her face marked up by these guys. It was just an all bad situation. And finally, number 1, Pyro. Pyro was once a student at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, and in X2, we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. By the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. And in the comics, Simon Lasker makes his first appearance as Pyro in X-Men Gold, Volume 2, Issue 1, when Mesmero tricks him into believing he's Charles Xavier, and he joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So not good on screen, not good in the comic books. Still a cool character, just likes to dip into the dark side. Kicking off the list at number 10, Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12, when Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Cyttorak. So Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Kane the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Kane dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier's school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Kane embraces the Cyttorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It helps the studio out quite a bit. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this X-Men list. Number 9, Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978. So she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she can shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of her thing. Number 8, Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina. And when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon. Number 7, Caliban. An albino mutant and a former member of the Morlocks, Caliban made his first comic book appearance in Uncanny X-Men 148. He has the ability to track down any mutant, and he actually sacrifices himself in Logan, where he was played by the hilarious Stephen Merchant. Great film. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's on Disney Plus now, rated R. So good. He was originally an ally to the X-Men, so I'm gonna count him as a hero who switched over to the dark side. Because once he became a tracker for Apocalypse in X-Factor issue 24, titled The Fall of Mutants. So Apocalypse gave him extra strength and renamed him Hellhound, taking the place of the Horseman Death. Number 6, Gazer. Making his first debut in X-Men Volume 2, issue 169, Gazer met the X-Men when a Golgotha invasion was threatening Earth. He was alone on a NASA space station, and due to his mutant abilities, he was the only person that could withstand high levels of radiation. So when these creatures approached Earth, he told Emma Frost, and then the X-Men joined him in space on his observation platform. Again, he wasn't knighted with a sword and deemed an official X-Men or anything like that, no. But he's a mutant who works in space to keep our planet safe, and he calls Emma Frost. So call him what you want, but this man's a hero. He's a bored, lonely hero up in space. He's definitely an X-Men. I'll say he's an X-Men. But then after the events of M-Day, things changed, and so did his morals. He lost his abilities, so now he was experiencing horrible radiation sickness, so he decided to literally jump ship, wanting to go out there instead of passing away alone in here. Fair, I mean, sad, but also makes a lick of sense. It's kind of like George Clooney in Gravity, just floating out in space.
Houston, I lost visual, Dr. Stone.
But while he was drifting in space like a hero, Apocalypse came on by to save his day, thus becoming the Horseman War. Number 5, Sunfire. He made his first debut in X-Men issue 64. Shiro Yashida's mother passed away of radiation poisoning when he was still young, and Shiro was raised by his uncle Tomo to hate the West and return to Japan to their imperial days. So he trained for years and attacked America when the X-Men pulled up to put a stop to it. So Sunfire ended up taking out his uncle and returning to Japan, but then he was sent to destroy an American cargo ship, but then Namor turned him for good. Now he was Japan's protector. When most of the X-Men were captured by Krakoa, Sunfire was recruited by Charles to help. He was named as one of the mythical 12, representing the power of nature alongside Storm and Iceman. So far, so good. But then during a battle with Deathstrike later on, he was presumed dead after an altercation, and the X-Men couldn't find his body. But you know who did? Apocalypse. Yep. He was turning him into the Horseman Famine, and he kind of had control over it, kind of. So he wanted to stay and see if he could help out Gazer, who I'd previously mentioned up there, but they were sadly both turned by the end of the day. At least he tried. Number 4, Forge. Forge is a mutant and a tribal shaman who made his debut in Uncanny X-Men 184. He's known for creating these amazing inventions, and before he worked for the X-Men, he was fighting in the Vietnam War, where he would use dark magic to save himself. He rejected the life of a shaman in order to serve. He was able to create advanced cybernetic prosthetics to replace his missing limbs during all these battles. And then after the events of M-Day, Forge searched the multiverse to try and find other mutants. Then there was an alternate world of mutants at war with a group of artificial mutants that were created by Forge. So he was bad. He's a bad guy in another world. Brilliant mind, but it can get him into a little bit of trouble in some of these stories, especially the Ultimate Universe, where he literally sided with Magneto. And during this, he actually created a power amplifier for Magneto to use in order to flip the Earth's magnetic poles and take out every living being on the planet. So thanks, Forge. Really cool. You couldn't have made like an iPhone 14. Cool, that's good too. Number 3, Storm. Aurora Monroe made her first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, and she's one of the more popular members of the X-Men, being portrayed by Halle Berry and Alexandra Shipp. She was recruited by Charles and she joined the team to save other original members from Krakoa. She was appointed leader after several years of work, and in X-Men Apocalypse, we see her recruited as a horseman. But by the end of the movie, she betrays him and joins the X-Men because she's not a fan of how he treats her idol, Mystique. It's probably the only time we'll see Storm evil, at least in this live action run. But it was still pretty entertaining. It was nice to see a younger version of Storm, and then of course be influenced by Apocalypse. It was kind of cool. I could do with more bad Storm. I mean, you know, just for a little bit. Number 2, Lord Xavier. We can't forget this one, okay? He's also known as the Witch King, and you can see him in Volume 2, Issue 9 of Extreme X-Men. So the Witch King ruled over Genosha and sports a look that is very menacing, maybe Power Rangers. It's pretty badass, but also kind of Power Rangers. It's right in the middle. He has an army of orcs and beasts on top of his already spectacular abilities. And in this issue, we also see a few upgrades to the Professor, like concussive energy blast for starters. And in the opening of the story, we see him effortlessly take down invaders with machines, so it doesn't matter how you roll up to this fight, Lord Xavier, Witch King of Genosha, will take you down with his armies of orcs and beasts. Probably one of the cooler versions. Finally, number 1, Deadpool. Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. It's such a blast to read, and I had to include it in here because it's so good. It's so Deadpool. The issue was released in August 2012, and just the front cover, you know what you're getting into. So what's the story here? What are we getting into? What happened to Wade? Well, his mouth wasn't sewn shut, and he didn't have swords for hands. Nothing like that this time. No. The X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to heal his insanity. The doctor, Psycho Man, was brainwashing Wade's in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices, which worked, but now all these voices were replaced with voices that were encouraging him to kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. So it went from bad to worse, and of course, Wade's the one to do it. Right off the bat, the series draws you in. I mean, it opens with the Fantastic Four facing off with Wade. Reed gets left all rubbery and left for dead and lifeless. It's really gruesome, but also really fun. Not for the faint of heart, but definitely fun, and obviously super gory.
At number 10, the Mongrels. The Mongrels are a multi-crew with names that sound like rejected comic book ideas, carrying a dark secret that adds a layer of tragedy to their villainy. We got Shadow Stalker, Fire Knives, Sawfist, Gunhawk, and Cannonfoot. But what truly sets them apart, aside from their terrible names, is their lineage, or rather their twisted heritage. You see, each member of the Mongrels is Wolverine's offspring, a revelation that only came to light after their individual demises at the hands of the very father they sought to torment. That's right, Wolverine unknowingly exterminated his own bloodline. Now, it probably didn't help that their shared mission was to turn Wolverine's life into a never-ending nightmare, but while their motivations remained shrouded in mystery, they pursued their vendetta by targeting Logan's loved ones, only to meet their untimely ends at his adamantium claws. The poetic tragedy is that Wolverine chose to bury them near the resting places of their mothers. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I would really appreciate it. At number 9 is Fury, the daughter of Wonder Woman and Steppenwolf. In her initial portrayal within the Earth 2 universe, Fury found herself on the wrong side of the comic divide. Raised by Steppenwolf, she donned a costume eerily reminiscent of Orion, bearing the indelible mark of her lineage. As the last Amazon born from Wonder Woman, Fury's isolation from her compassionate kin may have nudged her towards the abyss. The lure of Apocalypse proved strong, whether due to paternal influence or personal inclination. It took the persuasive powers of Mr. Miracle to reorient Fury's path, transforming her from harbinger of doom to a defender of the cosmos. At number 8 is Hope Pym. Unlike the familiar 616 timeline where the torch is often passed from one hero to the next, MC2 sees a generational power shift 15 years ahead of schedule. Enter Hope Pym, a character emblematic of the darker side of this generational transition. Her disillusionment with the new Avengers, perceived as a mockery of their parents' iconic legacy, took a sinister turn. Hope's misguided belief led her down a treacherous path, capturing and tormenting her fellow heroes, particularly Cassandra Lang. Her plan to obliterate the Avengers Mansion was only thwarted by the intervention of her own brother.
Number 7, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's so gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top, and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now, of course, there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the mutant massacre happened. So, okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the Horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man. Number 5, Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing. Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the 3rd of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with. Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned. Number 2, Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we'd have to put her at number 1.
At number 10, we have Bucky Barnes. This one is one that I think we're all familiar with if you've been watching the Marvel movies and, really into that, like myself, who's seen all of them. Anyways, Bucky starts off as a supportive best friend to Captain America. Then he dies, and it's a huge shock when we find out later that he's actually alive. But when the Captain and Bucky meet again, he is now the Winter Soldier. Hydra, of course, is behind this, and they wipe his memory. They give him this epic metal arm that's super strong and super cool, and then they keep him in suspended animation in between his evil missions so that he can't figure anything out. Of course, we know how that ends if we've watched the movies. Check them out if you haven't. Number 9 is Cyclops. You may also know him as Scott Summers, also known as Dreamy James Marsden. So cute. He was part of X-Men. He went to the school, he joined the team, he fought for good, but then after the death of the beloved Jean Grey, he just was never really the same. And it gets kind of more so soap opera-y, I'd say, for a bit. Like, he remarries, but then he hears that Jean might still be alive, so he just bails on his family, like child and all, he's just out. And then he begins having this psychic affair with Emma Frost also on the side, so he's kind of a dick, in my opinion. But after a lot of other strikes that are much more important than cheating and stuff in this world, he gets kicked out of X-Men. Then he's possessed by Phoenix Force, he kills Xavier, and he starts remaking the world into this totalitarian state. Like, whoa, that escalated quickly. Really not where I saw this sort of boy next door looking guy going. So his character gets really dark. I guess they had to kind of amp it up because he was just so like shreddies and cornflakes and all that. At number 8, we have Daredevil. So this blind vigilante from New York has always struggled with toting the line between good and evil, trying not to kill people because it's not great, that sort of thing. In one of the stories, he takes over the Hand Ninja clan and starts training them, but in the process, he gets possessed by the demonic entity known as the Beast of the Hand and becomes more and more extreme. He gets so evil, he even kills his longtime adversary, Bullseye. Eventually, other heroes start to realize that he's possessed, and then they get him back to the usual Daredevil. This is definitely a common theme, good guys getting possessed.
At number 7 is Ashley Barton. In the tangled web of alternate realities and twisted timelines, Ashley Barton's descent into villainy serves as a cautionary tale. Raised in the unforgiving wastelands of Earth 807128, the era in which Old Man Logan takes place, Ashley's lineage promised heroism, with her grandfather being the legendary Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, and her father the sharp-eyed Hawkeye. Wait a second, do the math? That's not good. However, Ashley's destiny took a dark turn when she sought to topple the reigning kingpin, only to find herself ensnared. Upon her rescue by her father Hawkeye, the narrative could have embraced redemption. However, Ashley's actions are shattered by that hope. In a shocking act of brutality, she used her spider strength to unalive the kingpin, seizing his throne and ruling the empire with an iron grip. As her father fled, she unleashed her forces, creating a web of turmoil, pun intended, that spiraled into chaos and darkness. A tragic example of how noble lineage can warp into something altogether sinister. At number 6 is Scar. Born from the cataclysmic events of Planet Hulk and World War Hulk, Scar's origins are drenched in tragedy. Bruce Banner's twin sons, Scar and Hero Kala, miraculously survived the annihilation of their home planet Sakaar, thanks to their mother's protective cocoons. Eventually, Scar arrives on Earth, where his actions teeter on the precipice of heroism and villainy. Driven by a twisted sense of justice, he becomes a self-proclaimed unaliver of unalivers, attempting to obliterate those he deems responsible for pain and destruction. Notably, Scar clashed with his father, the Hulk, in multiple epic battles, even impaling him once. His unpredictable nature eventually led him to join Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. At number 5 is Hero Kala. Hero Kala is the lesser-known offspring of the Incredible Hulk, who took a drastically different path than his father and twin brother Scar. Surviving the cataclysmic events on Sakaar, Hero Kala emerged as a force to be reckoned with, but not quite in the way you might expect from a superhero's child. See, instead of heroism, he embraced conquest and power. His connection to the old power, an artificial version of the power cosmic, fueled his ambition. During his time as a slave on Sakaar, Hero Kala sought knowledge about the old power. His thirst for vengeance ignited when Silver Surfer warned of Galactus' impending arrival, leading to the consumption of his home planet. Driven by rage and his perceived birthright, Hero Kala became a world breaker himself, rising to godlike status in pursuit of revenge against Galactus. At number 4 is Daken. Meet Daken, the offspring of Wolverine and the late Itsu. The name Daken itself carries the weight of his tumultuous upbringing, as it means mongrel or bastard dog in Japanese. This moniker was not unjustified, for Daken's mixed heritage subjected him to ridicule, leading to a cold and detached personality. Disowned by his adopted family, he found solace in the sinister embrace of Romulus. But Daken's descent into darkness didn't stop there. He confronted his own father, Wolverine, that left him impaled by his son's claws. Later, he clashed with Wolverine again, overpowering him. Wolverine's hope for redemption was met with bitter disappointment, as Daken not only usurped his father's mantle as Wolverine, but also led his version of the Brotherhood of Mutants. At number 3 is Legion. David Haller, the offspring of the renowned Charles Xavier, isn't your run-of-the-mill villain. Thanks to his multiple personality disorder, an unfortunate side effect of his power to assimilate personalities and abilities, David's life is a whirlwind of inner turmoil. You might remember him from FX's Legion, where his fractured psyche takes center stage. See, David isn't inherently evil, but his internal chaos just can't be ignored. His journey began with a bang when he absorbed the persona of a radical extremist group leader, a rather ominous start. As time passed, he continued to absorb other personalities, making it incredibly difficult to keep a grip on his own identity. Hero or villain, it's a blurred line for David. He's a perplexing mixture of, well, everything, a product of circumstance and the powers he never asked for. At number 2 is Amon Sur. The offspring of Abin Sur, a predecessor to Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps, emerged from the shadows with a vendetta that would shake the very foundation of intergalactic peacekeepers. Hailing from the enigmatic Unagaran race, known for their remarkable regenerative abilities, Amon Sur possessed an uncanny power, the capability to regrow severed body parts, including their own heads. This extraordinary trait would soon prove useful in his nefarious pursuits. Driven by a simmering rage ignited by his father's untimely demise, Amon Sur harbored deep-seated resentment towards the Green Lantern Corps. In his eyes, Abin Sur had chosen the Corps over his own family, leaving Amon feeling abandoned and forsaken. godforsaken. Consumed by anger, Amon turned to the sinister allure of the Guardian Yellow Power Ring, heralding his descent into the darkness. With his newfound power, Amon Sur unleashed a relentless assault on the very organization his father had sought to destroy, defying everything his predecessor had once stood for, and forging a path of chaos and destruction. And at number 1 is Jason Todd. Alright. Technically, Jason Todd isn't the son of a superhero, but through adoption and mentorship, Jason Todd, much like Dick Grayson before him and Tim Drake following, he is most definitely thought of as a son by Batman. This character serves as perhaps the most famous example of a superhero kid going bad, as the second Robin would go on to become the notorious anti-hero, the Red Hood. It all started, or rather ended, when Jason's fate was tragically sealed by the Joker, who brutally took his life via a crowbar whooping and a massive explosion. However, eventually Jason was brought back to life. Abandoning the ideals of his mentor Batman, Jason embraced a far more ruthless approach to crime fighting. Armed with firearms and a willingness to employ extreme methods, he aimed to put a definitive end to Gotham's criminal underworld. Now, despite a lingering sense of righteousness, Jason's actions veered sharply from the conventional hero's path, casting a dark shadow over his once promising future.